My name is Alex, and I've been working at Spirit Halloween for 3 seasons now. If you've never worked retail during Halloween season, let me tell you, it's absolute chaos. We're open from August through to November the 2nd, and those 4 months are a blur of costume fittings, animatronic malfunctions, and parents arguing over the last superhero costume in their kid's size. I started working there during my junior year of college. The pay was decent for seasonal work, and I figured, how hard could it be? Sell costumes, help customers, clean up after kids who treat the store like a playground. Simple, right? I had no idea about the restricted inventory list. Nobody told me about the costumes we were not supposed to sell. And I definitely didn't know what happens when you accidentally sell one of them to the wrong person. Let me start you from the beginning, because what happened 3 weeks ago has made me question everything I thought I knew about Halloween, costumes, and the thin line between pretending to be something else and actually becoming it. Spirit Halloween stores are basically pop-up operations. We move into vacant retail spaces every August, old Circuit City locations, abandoned department stores, stripped mall spaces that have been empty for months. The company has it down to a science. They send in a crew to transform any empty building into a Halloween wonderland in about a week. Our location this year was in what used to be a Toys R Us. Huge space, high ceilings, perfect for displaying the 12-foot skeleton that became our most popular item. The setup crew worked fast. One day it was an empty building with dusty floors and broken ceiling tiles. The next, it was wall-to-wall costumes, decorations, and mechanical monsters. My manager, Carol, had been doing this for 8 years. She was one of those people who lived for Halloween, not just the holiday, but the entire industry around it. She knew the profit margins on every item, could predict which costumes will sell out first, and had a encyclopedic knowledge of our inventory systems. During my first week, Carol walked me through the basics: how to work the register, where different costume categories were located, how to handle returns. Well, we don't, unless the item is defective. It was standard retail training. But on my 4th day, she pulled me aside for what she called advanced procedures. "Alex, you seem responsible, so I'm going to trust you with some sensitive information," she said, leading me to the back storage room. "Every Spirit Halloween location has a restricted inventory list. These are costumes that we stock, but we don't actively sell." She handed me a laminated sheet of paper with about 20 items listed on it. The list looked official, corporate letterhead, proper formatting, all very professional. But the costume names were strange. Some of the items I actually recognised: the Mourner, adult size medium only; Victorian Child, no sizes above 4T; the Plague Doctor, authentic 1600s replica. Others were more cryptic: the Last Resident, What Used to Be, and the Empty Suit. "Why don't we sell these?" I asked. Carol's expression became serious. "Corporate policy. These costumes have been problematic in the past. Customer complaints, legal issues, that sort of thing. We keep them in stock for inventory purposes, but if a customer asks about them specifically, you politely suggest alternatives." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that result in corporate lawyers getting involved," she said. "Look, Alex, I've been doing this for almost a decade, and I've learned not to ask too many questions about corporate policies. They know what they're doing." She showed me where the restricted costumes were stored, a locked cabinet in the back corner of the stockroom. The costumes inside looked normal enough, though they were all individually wrapped in plastic and had additional tags I've never seen before. "If someone specifically asks for one of these costumes by name, you come and get me immediately," Carol said. "Don't handle it yourself. Don't try to talk them out of it. Just find me. Understood?" I nodded, but I was curious. What could possibly be so problematic about a costume that a major retailer would stock it but refuse to sell it? For the first few weeks, everything was normal. We sold hundreds of costumes, Superheroes, princesses, zombies, witches, all the classics. I help parents find the right sizes, explain the differences between our standard and the deluxe costume line, and learn to navigate the chaos of peak Halloween shopping season. The restricted list became just another part of my job. Occasionally, I'd check the storage cabinet during the inventory count, but none of the costumes ever seemed to move. They just sat there, wrapped in plastic, gathering dust. Then, in mid-October, I had my first encounter with someone who knew about the restricted costumes. It was a Tuesday evening, about an hour before closing. The store was mostly empty except for a few last-minute shoppers and a group of college kids trying on masks. I was restocking the adult vampire costumes when a woman approached me. She was maybe 45, well-dressed, with the kind of precise appearance that suggested she was used to getting what she wanted. She looked around to make sure no one else was nearby, then leaned in close. "I need to speak with someone about the special inventory," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean," I replied, though I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly what she meant. "The restricted items," she said. "I've been to 3 other spirit locations and they've all told me to try here. I need the mourner in adult medium." I remembered Carol's instructions. Don't handle it yourself, find her immediately. Let me get the manager," I said. I found Carol in the office, working on inventory reports. When I told her about the customer's request, her face went pale. "Shit," she muttered. "I was hoping we'll get through this season without this." "Without what?" "Someone who knows about the list." Carol saved her work and closed the laptop. "Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go talk to the customer. You're going to stay here and continue with normal operations. Whatever you hear, whatever happens, you don't get involved. Clear?" I nodded, but I was more curious than ever. I tried to focus on restocking, but I kept glancing towards the front of the store where Carol was talking to the woman. Their conversation lasted about 10 minutes, and it looked intense. The woman kept gesturing empathetically, while Carol kept shaking her head. Finally, Carol walked back to the storage room. She came out with one of the wrapped costumes from the restricted cabinet, the mourner, in adult medium. The woman paid in cash, took the costume and just left without another word. After the store closed, I asked Carol what that was all about. "Some customers have specialized needs," she said. "The restricted costumes aren't really restricted because they're dangerous or defective. They're restricted because they're for a very specific clientele." "What kind of clientele?" Carol was quiet for a long moment. "People who need costumes for reasons other than Halloween parties." That answer raised more questions than it answered, but Carol made it clear that the conversation was over. I went home that night wondering about the woman who bought the mourner costume. What could someone possibly need with a mourning costume outside of Halloween, and why was it restricted to adult medium only? The next few days were busy as we approached Halloween weekend. I didn't have much time to think about the restricted costumes or mysterious customers, but then I started noticing things. On Thursday, a man came in asking specifically for the Plague Doctor authentic 1600 replica. He looked nervous, kept checking his phone, and paid with a credit card that he had to try 3 times before it worked. Carol handled that transaction personally as well. On Friday, a teenager came in with her grandmother asking about the Victorian child costumes. The grandmother did all the talking, and she seemed to know exactly what she wanted. Carol sold them a size 4T costume, even though the girl was clearly much older than a toddler. On Saturday, our busiest day of the season, a woman came in 15 minutes before closing asking for what used to be. Carol actually argued with her about it, their voices getting loud enough that other customers started staring. Finally, Carol sold her the costume, but she made the woman sign some kind of waiver first. I was starting to see a pattern. All of these customers knew the exact names of the restricted costumes. They weren't browsing or asking for suggestions. They came in with the specific request for items that weren't displayed anywhere in the store. After we closed that Saturday night, I decided to do some research. I stayed late to help Carol with inventory, and when she went to the office to handle paperwork, I snuck back to the restricted costume cabinet. It was still locked, but I could see through the glass front. Most of the costumes were gone. We'd sold at least 6 of them in the past week, leaving only a handful in the cabinet. But looking at what remained, I started to notice details I'd missed before. The last resident, it came with what looked like authentic house keys attached to the belt. The empty suit appeared to be just that, a business suit that somehow maintained its shape even though there was clearly nothing inside it. The physician, night rounds, included a medical bag that looked generally vintage, not like the plastic props that came with our regular doctor costumes. These weren't typical mass-produced Halloween costumes. They looked handmade, authentic, and expensive, way more expensive than anything else we sold. I was examining the tags when I heard Carol's voice behind me. "Find what you're looking for?" I spun around, expecting to be in trouble for snooping, but Carol didn't look angry. She looked tired. "I was just curious," I said. "These costumes look really different from everything else we sell." Carol walked over and unlocked the cabinet, pulling out one of the remaining costumes. The substitute teacher. "They are different," she said. "These aren't made by our usual suppliers. They come from specialty manufacturers." She held up the substitute teacher costume. It looked like a perfectly normal outfit. Conservative blouse, knee-length skirt, cardigan, even sensible shoes. But something about it made me feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was how perfectly it was pressed, or how the fabric seemed to move slightly even when Carol was holding it still. What makes them special? Carol rewrapped the costume and put it back in the cabinet. "They're method costumes." "Method costumes?" "Think of method acting," she said. "Some actors don't just play a role, they become the character completely. Method costumes work the same way. They don't just make you look like something else, they help you become something else." I stared at the cabinet full of costumes, finally understanding why they were restricted. "That's why people come looking for them specifically," I said. "They're not buying Halloween costumes, they're buying transformations." Carol nodded. "The mourner isn't for someone who wants to dress up as a grieving widow for a party. It's for someone who needs to convincingly mourn at a funeral. The plague doctor isn't for Halloween. It's someone who needs to appear as a historical medical practitioner for, let's call them, specialized purposes. Is that legal?" "Technically, we're just selling costumes," Carol said. "What people do with them after they leave the store isn't our business. Corporate has lawyers who make sure we stay on the right side of the law." "But what about the size restrictions? Why is the mourner only available in adult medium?" Carol's expression darkened. "Because that's the size that works. These costumes aren't just clothing, they're fitted to specific purposes. The mourner in medium fits the role perfectly. Other sizes just don't work the same way." She locked the cabinet again. "Alex, I need you to promise me something. Don't get curious about these customers. Don't ask them questions. Don't try to follow up on what they do with the costumes. Some things are better left unknown." I should have listened to Carol's warning, but 3 days later, curiosity got the better of me. It was Monday night, October the 30th, the night before Halloween. We were staying open until midnight for last-minute shoppers, and the store was still busy despite the late hour. I was working the register when a man approached me. He was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit, and he had the kind of confidence that suggested he was used to getting his way. He looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned across the counter. "I need the empty suit," he said. "Tonight." I knew the drill. Get Carol, let her handle it, don't ask questions. But Carol had just left an hour earlier for a dinner break and wouldn't be back until 11. My manager isn't here right now, I said. She'll be back in about an hour if you want it. The man's expression changed. I can't wait. I need it tonight, before midnight. I'm sorry, but I'm not authorised to... Look, kid, he interrupted. I know about your restricted inventory. I know you have the empty suit in the back. I'm willing to pay double the list price if you get it for me right now. I knew I should refuse. Carol had been clear about the procedure, but the man seemed desperate and he was offering to pay double. I figured it was just a costume. How much trouble could it cause? Let me check our inventory, I said. I went to the back storage room and unlocked the restricted cabinet. The empty suit was there, wrapped in plastic like all the others. It looked innocent enough, just a navy blue business suit with a white shirt and red tie. But when I picked it up, it felt wrong. The suit maintained its shape perfectly, as if someone was wearing it. But it was clearly empty. I could see through the armholes to the back of the jacket. The fabric was warm to the touch, despite it being in a climate-controlled storage room. I brought it out to the customer. He paid immediately, in cash, counted out exactly double the marked price. As he was leaving, he turned back to me. You made the right choice, kid, he said. Some opportunities only come once. The man left with the empty suit and I thought that was the end of it. Just another unusual customer buying an unusual costume. But the next morning, Halloween Day, I saw a news report that made my blood run cold. A local businessman had been found dead in his home office, apparently from a heart attack. The strange thing was, his body was discovered wearing only underwear. The security cameras showed him entering his house fully dressed the night before. His business suit was never found. The businessman matched the description of the man who bought the empty suit. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. People have heart attacks all the time. The missing suit could have been taken by paramedics or family members. There had to be a logical explanation. But when Carol came in that afternoon, she immediately noticed the empty suit was missing from the restricted cabinet. Who authorised this sale? She said. The customer seemed desperate, I explained. He said he needed it before midnight, and you weren't here, so You sold the empty suit without authorisation. Carol's voice was sharp with panic. Do you have any idea what you've done? She immediately called corporate. The conversation was tense, with Carol repeating phrases like unauthorised sale and containment protocol and liability assessment. When she hung up, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Absolute fear. Alex, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Every detail. What the customer looked like, what he said, how he paid, everything. I told her everything I could remember. Carol took notes, asked clarifying questions and made several more phone calls to corporate. Finally, she sat me down in the break room. I'm going to have to explain something to you, and I need you to listen carefully, she said. The restricted costumes aren't just method costumes, they're symbiotic. What does that mean? They don't just help you become something else temporarily. They replace you. The empty suit was designed for corporate executives who needed to step away from their responsibilities permanently. When someone puts it on, it takes over their role completely. I felt sick. You mean the man who brought it? It's probably dead, yes, but the empty suit will continue living his life, making his decisions, running his business. No one else will know the difference. Carol explained that each restricted costume worked differently. The mourner was for people who needed to grieve convincingly at funerals they had no real connection to, often for inheritance purposes. The plague doctor was used by people who needed to access historical sites or documents related to medieval medicine. The Victorian child, well, that was for adults who needed to appear as a child for reasons Carol wouldn't elaborate on. Why does Spirit Halloween sell these? I asked. Because the demand exists, Carol said. There are people who need these transformations for legitimate purposes. Actors, researchers, people in witness protection. But there are also people who use them for less legitimate reasons. She pulled out a file folder I've never seen before. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, and what looked like internal corporate memos. Every restricted costume sale is tracked, she said. Corporate maintains files on what happens afterwards. Sometimes it's harmless, an actor using the substitute teacher to research a role, a historian using the plague doctor to understand medieval medicine practices. She flipped to a different section of the file, but sometimes it's not harmless. The last resident has been used by people who want to claim ownership of abandoned properties. What used to be is popular with people who want to assume the identities of deceased relatives. The corporate lawyers have found ways to make it all technically legal, Carol continued. We're selling costumes, not facilitating identity theft or fraud. What customers do after they leave the store is their own business. But you knew selling these costumes was connected to crime. I knew selling them without proper authorization was dangerous, she said. The restricted list exists for a reason. These costumes are supposed to be sold only to pre-approved customers who've gone through a vetting process. She showed me another document, a list of approved buyers for restricted costumes. The list included theatrical companies, historical societies, law enforcement agencies, and some individuals whose names were blacked out. The man you sold the empty suit to wasn't on this list, Carol said, which means you just sold a symbolic costume to someone who's probably going to use it to commit fraud, identity theft, or worse. That afternoon, while we were preparing for our final day of business, Carol got a call from corporate. The conversation was brief, but I could tell from her expression that it wasn't good news. They're sending someone, she said after hanging up. A corporate specialist to handle the unauthorized sale situation. What kind of specialist? The kind that deals with restricted costume complications. 2 hours later, a woman in a black suit arrived at the store. She looked like a lawyer, but she introduced herself as customer service representative, named Mrs. Chen. She asked to speak with me privately. Miss Chen led me to the back office and closed the door. She had a briefcase full of documents and what looked like surveillance photographs. Mr. Alex, she said, I understand you sold a restricted costume to an authorized customer. I didn't know he was unauthorized, I said. He seemed to know about the costume specifically, and my manager wasn't available to handle the transaction. Mrs. Chen nodded and made notes in the file. The customer you sold to was named Richard Brennan. He was the CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company. Are you aware of what happened to Mr. Brennan? I saw on the news that he died of a heart attack. Mr. Brennan didn't die of a heart attack, Mrs. Chen said. Mr. Brennan was replaced by the empty suit. His body was found because the transformation process requires the disposal of the original physical form. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a series of photographs. They showed the businessman's house, his office, and what looked like security camera footage. The entity currently inhabiting Mr. Brennan's life has already made several significant business decisions, she said. It sold his company's environmental protection division, fired 37 employees, and restructured their debt in ways that benefit certain offshore accounts. You mean the empty suit is actively running his business? The suit becomes a perfect replica of the person who wore it, with access to all their memories, skills and knowledge, but it has its own agenda. The original Richard Brennan cared about his employees and environmental responsibility. The entity wearing this suit cares only about profit maximization. Mrs. Chen showed me more documents, financial records, emails, meeting transcripts. The change in Mr. Brennan's behaviour had been immediate and dramatic. This is the problem with unauthorized sales, she said. When we vet customers for restricted costumes, we ensure they understand the consequences and have legitimate reasons for the transformation. Mr. Brennan brought the suit impulsively, probably thinking it was just an unusual Halloween costume. What happens now? I asked. Now we implement containment protocols, Mrs. Chen said. The entity currently using Mr. Brannan's identity will be monitored. If it begins to pose a significant threat to others or to our corporate interests, we'll arrange for its removal. How do you even remove something like that? Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change. That's not your concern. Your concern is understanding that this situation never happened. You never sold a restricted costume to an unauthorized customer. Mr. Brannan died of natural causes. Our conversation, it never took place. She handed me a document to sign, a non-disclosure agreement with very specific language about costume-related incidents and corporate liability protection. Sign this and you'll receive a substantial bonus in your final paycheck, she said. Refuse to sign it and you'll face legal consequences for violation of corporate policies and potential criminal charges related to Mr. Brannan's death. I signed the document. What choice did I have? Miss Chen left shortly after, taking all her documents with her. Karen and I finished the night cleaning up the store and preparing for the official close of Halloween season. As we were packing up the final boxes of inventory, I asked Carol what would happen to the remaining restricted costumes. They'll go back to corporate for redistribution for next year's locations, she said. The cycle continues. Don't you feel bad about being part of this? Carol stopped packing and looked at me seriously. Alex, I've been working Halloween retail for 8 years. I've seen what happens when people try to fight the system versus when they learn to work within it. The restricted costumes exist whether I sell it or not. At least this way, some of them go to people who use them responsibly. We finished packing in silence. As I was leaving that night, I took one last look at the empty store. In a few days it would be stripped of all the Halloween decorations and returned to whoever owned the building. By next August, Spirit Halloween was set up in a different location, with a new staff and a new restricted inventory cabinet. But the costumes themselves will continue to exist, continue to be sold, continue to transform people into things they were never meant to be. That was 2 weeks ago. I've been checking the news every day for updates about Richard Brennan's company. The entity wearing this suit has been busy, massive layoffs, environmental violations, suspicious financial transactions. But no one seems to notice that the Richard Brennan making these decisions is fundamentally different from the man who ran the company a month ago. I also got my final paycheck from Spirit Halloween. Along with my regular pay, there was a bonus of $5,000. My reward for signing the NDA and keeping quiet about the restricted costume sales. But I can't stop thinking about what Mrs. Chen said about the next year's locations. Somewhere right now, corporate is identifying empty retail spaces for next Halloween season. They're hiring managers and training staff and stocking inventory, and they're preparing new restricted costume cabinets for a new group of unsuspecting seasonal employees. If you're thinking about working at Spirit Halloween store next season, let me give you some advice. If your manager shows you a restricted inventory list, ask to be transferred to a different location. If a customer comes in asking for costumes by specific names that aren't displayed on the sales floor, refuse to help them. And if you're ever tempted to bend the rules to make a sale, remember that some costumes don't just change how you look, they change who you are, and sometimes they make sure you never change back. I won't be working retail next Halloween season. I'm going back to school, getting a degree in something as far away from customer service as possible. But I know the restricted costumes will still be out there, waiting in a locked cabinet in Spirit Halloween stores across the country, waiting for curious employees and desperate customers who don't understand what they're really buying. I just got a text from an unknown number. Thank you for your service this Halloween season. We have exciting opportunities available for experienced retail associates. Interested in management positions? Reply for details. Message included a photo of a new Spirit Halloween store being set up in a vacant Best Buy location about 50 miles from here. In the photo, I can see employees setting up the restricted costume cabinet. I'm deleting this text, changing my phone number tomorrow. Some job opportunities are too dangerous to consider, even if they pay really, really well.